Love, exciting and new.
Hello, Hannah Waddingham here. Have you seen the fabulous new Sun Princess? World-class entertainment, exceptional dining, and the greatest pizza ever.
It's a love.
Don't miss our Come Aboard sale with up to 40% off and free room upgrades. Visit princess.com or call your travel advisor to book. Princess Cruises. Terms and restrictions apply. Offer ends 2/28/25. Ships of Bermudan and British Registry.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Alison, and I'm so glad you're here to discover what brings out the best of you. This podcast is all about breaking free from painful patterns, mending the past, and discovering our true selves in God. I can't wait to get started as we learn together how to become the best version of who we are with God's help. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this week's bonus episode of the Best of You podcast. I wanted to try something new over the next few months. As we've entered into 2025 and I've thought a lot about the podcast and where I want to go with it, I decided I want to bring you some bonus conversations that delve even deeper into some of the topics that resonate with you. So many of you have shared how this podcast has become a bit of a touchstone or a refuge in your week, a space to pause and feel seen and encouraged. And that feedback really means the world to me. And it's why in this new year, I'm committed to offering content that continues to encourage and empower and invite every single one of us on this journey of healing, on this journey of becoming even more of our true selves in God. There's never been a time where that is more important for each and every one of us, where we stay focused on this work of inviting God into every single part of who we are so that we continue to grow and heal and become wise and radiate that goodness and wisdom and strength into the world around us. Today, we're going to dive into a unique spin on this idea of a digital detox. Most of us struggle with our phones, with our screens, how to help our kids with their phones and their screens. There's no surprise that that's a hot topic in many best-selling books and in the media. But today's guest has a unique spin on the topic that just really meant a lot to me. I really enjoyed his new book, and I wanted to have him on the podcast to talk about this experiment that he did. The book is called Reconnected, and it's by Carlos Whittaker. Carlos is a new friend of mine, though I've followed him on Instagram for a while now, along with his Insta Familia. And I read his new book over the Christmas holiday. I was actually sick. We were on a family ski vacation, and while I was stuck inside the lodge, unable to join my family on the slopes, I read this book, and it really spoke to me. And we'll get into more of why I think it's a unique spin on this topic in today's episode. But let me just read you the subtitle because it'll give you a great teaser of how unique this project is. The subtitle of Reconnected is How 7 Screen-Free Weeks with Monks and Amish Farmers Helped Me Recover the Lost Art of Being Human. And I just really loved it. What I find so compelling about the book is that it's not just about trying to convince us to get off our phone or spend less time on the screens or even give us sort of practical steps how to do those things. Instead, what Carlos is doing is he's drawing us into a story that creates a longing for something more, for a richer, deeper way of life that in some ways we can tend to forget or at least set aside because the screens are just so compelling and how quickly they draw us in. Back in episode 136, I talked about the power of imagination with Michael Cusick and how envisioning a different life or a better way of being can catalyze real change in our own current circumstances. And Carlos's book really helped do that for me in this realm of thinking about technology and screens. It helped me imagine or reimagine what life beyond screens can look like. If you're not familiar with Carlos Whittaker, he's an author, a speaker, and a storyteller who has built his career creating authentic, meaningful moments, both online and in person. You may have come across him during the pandemic. That's when I came across his work when he became a source of wisdom, humor, and grace-filled conversations about some of the hard issues we are all navigating. Carlos has an incredible gift for drawing people in and talking about difficult topics in a way that's both hopeful and encouraging. He's the author of several books, including the best-selling Kill the Spider and Enter Wild. And his latest book, Reconnected, is a USA Today bestseller that takes readers on a journey through 7 weeks without screens of any kind. In our conversation today, Carlos shares the story behind this bold experiment. And I loved his answer when I asked him at the very end of the episode, what was it like for you to come back online after these 7 weeks away? There's just a lot of really, really great gems in this episode today. I'm so excited to bring you my conversation with Carlos Whittaker. Let me share with you, Carlos, I came across your work in 2020 when we were all in the pandemic on our phones, on Instagram, and I really loved what you were doing. I have a very complicated relationship with social media, but to this day, you're just creating authentic, beautiful moments. So this is what you do. This is your livelihood. It's your vocation. It seems like you enjoy it. There's a joy about it, which is why I like following you. It doesn't feel forced. You have this moment where you're like, I am on here 7 hours of every day. I have to do something. Something has to change. Tell us about that.
It's so weird whenever anybody asks me, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, well, like I can say I'm an author because I have written a lot of books and I'm a speaker and I talk about my books. But what I really do every day is I look at my phone and talk to it and then, hit send and it whooshes off somewhere and lands on some server somewhere that sends it to the sky and then to everyone else's phones. And I love it. Like you said, like I love this kind of accidental, career path that I've landed on where I just kind of talk to people every day. And I, try to do it in a way where, 2020 was probably the year for me that my Instagram, really exploded and people started coming to listen. I was talking about a lot of hard things that we were going through. And I tried to talk about those things in grace-filled ways. And everybody, kind of felt like they were like they found a new friend, like I've got this kind of with socials, like people, the way and again, I don't know, I haven't ever been able to pinpoint this, but people just trust me in a very quick, like they rapidly come to trust me. And then I'm kind of like their buddy. Like I'm like, oh, Carlos is my friend. So if I meet someone in a book line that follows me on Instagram, they will literally look at their friend and go, so this is my friend Carlos, and this is my friend. And then they catch themselves saying that. And they're like, I know we've never met and you don't know me, but you're my friend. So all of that to say, like, I love it. And I love that. And I love everything that social media and screens have allowed me to do. And then 2020, happens. And now I'm really on we're all really on it, right? Where everyone's got a podcast. Everybody's doing Insta Lives. We're all there. 2021, I'm doing it more and more. And then I think it was early 22 when I got that notification that comes across my screen that we all get on Sundays, or unless you turned it off. I just learned recently you can turn that off. But it said that I was averaging, I think it said 7 hours and 23 minutes a day on my screen, on my phone. And I just remember, I can't remember if I was sitting in church. I just remember being like, ooh, like what? It just, the number, I'd seen that number many times, but for some reason in that moment, I was like, wait a second. So how many hours am I awake? And then I was like, well, let me do a little bit of math. So I started doing my math, which I'm not very good at, but that kind of equaled 49 hours a week. And I was like, whoa, that's like 2 full awake and sleepy times that I'm staring at this thing. Then I kept doing the math. It was close to 100 days a year. That's when I did this math within 2 minutes, I'm pulling my cut. Then I was like, oh, if I live to be 80 something, I'll lose 12 years, or I can't remember how many years of my life. And that was when I said, I have to do something. No matter how much I love doing social media, no matter how much good I see happening, and there's been so much good that had happened on my account, there's no way I was created as a human with some semblance of a soul in me to do this, that like to look at this thing this much. And so I just said, then began the journey of like, well, what am I going to do? And, I tried to do read a phone detox book, and I read like just all these things. I started like putting rules in place, and I set up screen time, and none of it worked. And I was like, I think I'm going to have to go all in. I think I'm not going to be able to I ask anyone that's tried to fix it with all the little things that we try to fix it with, how's it going? And nobody has figured it out yet. So I was like, that's it. I'm going rogue. I'm going completely offline for 2 months. And, it was a few days short of 2 months. And I did not look at a screen for almost 7.5 weeks. I didn't look at an Apple Watch, an iPhone, a laptop, a TV, nothing. I didn't consume anything. And I lived with monks and I lived with Amish farmers. And I got my brain scanned by a neurologist before and after. And I said, I'm going to make this a thing. And so it became a thing. And so that's where the book you're reading, Reconnected, How 7 Screen-Free Weeks with Monks and Amish Farmers Helped Me Recover the Lost Art of Being Human.
Okay, so much I love here. One of the things I love how God works with us is you are a storyteller. And I love how you turned this experiment into a story, is how God works with us. It's like there's a nudge of something's got to give, something's got to change. And then the storyteller in you kind of works with that part of you. And you create a story about it. It's such a good book and it draws you in. It's a story. The other thing that I think is really beautiful, and I want to get into this, Carlos, is it really becomes, the book is less and less about, you're not even talking about devices at all. You're talking about what you experienced in these two places. And we sort of forget about the devices, which is this beautiful sort of meta thing.
Yeah, I'm so grateful you even said that, because that's what I'm trying to tell people that maybe don't know about the book or are interested. I'm like, actually, like, this thing isn't even about a phone. Like, for 3 days out of 7.5 weeks, this whole experiment was about a screen. And then day 4 to the end of my thing, it wasn't even about that. And I think there's already there's so much good data and research done on, what phones are doing to us. Like, I didn't need to write that book. Like, what it quickly turned into is not why phones are bad, but why it's so beautiful on the other side. And yes, that is where, the stories in this book aren't necessarily teaching us how to not be on our phone. They're reminding us of all these beautiful things that we used to do before the phones, that now, because I'm doing those things, I'm just on my phone less. Like, I literally haven't set up any rules. I don't have screen time on my phone. I've just fallen back in love with all the things I learned at the monastery, all the things I learned with the Amish. And once you taste what life is like, and once you taste that goodness, once you taste a good steak, you don't want to have the Sizzler steak anymore. You're just like, oh, why would I want to go do that? So yes, I'm glad that you felt that, because I tried to write a book that wasn't shaming people into getting off their phones. It was more making people excited about what's on the other side of them.
100%. That is what I was so drawn in to, what you were sharing. It again, that word longing. There was like a longing. Oh, I want this. Yeah. This is so good, right? And it's not I don't need my phone. It's right. This, and I was thinking back to things I used to do. We'll get into this, but when you're talking about how much we've acclimated to technology, forget about social media. I was thinking back to when we were kids. Now, we live now back in Wyoming, which is where I grew up. It's very rural. And I'll try to explain to my young adult kids the joy of cruising Maine.
Yes, totally.
And they cannot understand it, Carlos. They're like, why? I'm like, we didn't have phones. We couldn't text each other. We didn't know where people were. So we had to go drive up and down to find people.
There's Scott. Totally. No.
And how delighted you were when you found the people and you kind of pulled over and you had this impromptu. They don't get it. I was thinking about all those things, and that was not what you were talking about, but it was reminding me of these joys. So let's talk about it. So start with the Benedictine months. You get dropped off for 2 weeks. Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
I do. I'm on my way there. I'm flying there. I'm in the car when I land with my friend Brian. And, I'd already gotten my brain scanned. And so now I'm actually starting to feel, as we're getting closer, literal physical symptoms of anxiety. Like my heart was palpitating. Like my heart never skipped a beat. I was like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. Like, what's happening? And the closer I got, the more I couldn't swallow. And I get there and they lead me up to Father Patrick, I think is who it was, leads me up to my tiny little hermitage at the top of the hill overlooking the monastery. And, my friend Brian has helped me with my bags. And I'll just never forget, we go back down, he gets in my car, he takes my phone and takes my backpack, takes my laptop, takes everything, and was like, all right, dude, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And I was like, what? And then he just left me. I've never, and I still haven't felt this feeling since that moment. I don't know what the feeling is, but like you're dropped off on a deserted island and someone drives away and you have no way of getting off of it. So then all of these massive realizations starts hitting me. I immediately, within 2 minutes, reach into my phone to grab, in my pocket to grab my phone, and it's not there because I had a thought or something. And, I go back up to my little hermitage, and so begins the worst 3 days of the whole experiment. Like those first 3 days were terrifying. They were lonely. The Benedictines spent a lot of time in silence. And so I was actually spending those first 3 days about 23 hours of my 24 hours in silence. And, I know, like, listen, introverts hear about this and introverts are like, oh, I would love to spend 23 hours. I was like, no, you wouldn't. There's not a human that, except for maybe if you're a monk, that's really called into this world. And so I had a lot of physical manifestations like heart palpitations, night sweats. I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, tightness in my chest. And it was rough, those first few days. And I realized pretty quickly, I thought I was actually getting sick. Like I thought I was getting the flu. Come to find out, after talking to my doctor when I got back, and he's like, no, you were literally coming off of this drug and you were detoxing. And so those first few days of detoxing from what I was consuming on my phone screen were horrible. But then day 4, I think it was day 4, I'll never forget, Alison, waking up. And for 3 days, maybe it felt like the only way I can describe it is like if anyone has asthma that's listening to your show and like you can feel an asthma attack coming on and then you can't breathe for a minute, but then you take a hit of the inhaler and then suddenly you go from like not being able to breathe to like, whoa. And it was day 4. It felt like I just took a hit of an inhaler and I could breathe for the first time. And it felt like an elephant stepped off my chest. It was, I think, the realization of, wait a second, this is maybe how we were meant to be. Like the way I'm breathing, the deepness, the stillness, the slowness, all of these things, the way these Benedictines are living, it took a few days, but when I finally got there, oh my goodness, I got there and it was an incredible few weeks.
That's amazing. It reminds me when you describe it a little bit. One of my favorite books is The Last Battle, the last book in the Narnia series by C.S. Lewis. If you've never read it, it's one of the most beautiful metaphors for what it's like to step into what we think of. We have so many bad cliches for like heaven or eternity, but it's like we're stepping into what we were meant for. And it's kind of like stepping out of this thing we don't even realize is holding us back when you go through that door. And it's almost what you were describing. It's like, whoa, this is the water in which I was meant to swim.
Yes. I use the asthma example because literally when I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, I don't know, 15 years ago, I never had asthma in my life. And we moved to Middle Tennessee, and I'll never forget my wife after a few weeks was like, hey, babe, you're wheezing every night. Like you're wheezing. And I was like, what do you mean? I feel fine. I'm not wheezing. She's like, no, like it sounds like you're not breathing. And I was like, I'm fine. She's like, go to an allergist. So I go to an allergist. I've been living here a month now. He had me blow into a tube and he's like, yeah, man, you're only using like 60% of your lung capacity. And I was like, what? He goes, the problem is you're so used to it, you don't even know you're not breathing. So then he gave me an inhaler. And after that first hit, I was like, I went from 60% to 100%. And it was that Narnia feeling you're talking about. It was like, oh, this is breathing. Oh, wait a second. I didn't even know I was suffocating before. So yes, just agreeing with you.
It's amazing. And so you step into it then for these next 2 weeks. And again, these are words we hear, but until you've kind of stepped through that doorway, solitude, wonder. I loved that. Wrestling. Just give us some highlights of what some of those new awarenesses for maybe some old words that, again, we can try to be like, I should do these things. I should spend time, but actually you were inhabiting these things.
I was living them. The first really cool realization that happened a few days in was I was sitting in the chapel, right? So you would pray with the monks 6 times a day. It was just a lot of chanting in Latin and a lot of praying very slowly. And those first few days, actually, I was really boring. Like I was just like, oh my gosh, like what? I can't believe they do this every day. And so I began to wonder. I was like, well, I wonder why they do this 6 times a day. That's kind of weird. I remember when I thought that, I pulled my phone, or tried to pull my phone out, and it wasn't there. Because I was like, oh, I'll just Google it. Like I'll find out, why do Benedictine monks? And all of a sudden I was hit this realization, oh, I guess I'm just going to have to wonder. This is weird. Well, wait a second. This is actually maybe God created us to not know everything. Maybe there's something in us that we're supposed to wonder just as much as we're supposed to know. And so when I tried to pull out my phone, which wasn't there, it was the Benedictines have this time of grand silence. So they have like 14 straight hours where you can't talk. And this was during the grand silence. So I couldn't even ask one of the monks why they do this 6 times a day. And so I was stuck wondering. And so suddenly so began 7 weeks of me wondering about a lot. And oh my gosh.
I can hardly imagine.
I know.
Literally, it was so relatable how quick we are to punch in. Now we have ChatGPT, so it's even more instant.
I know. I call Google the wonder killer because what happens is when we're in a group, right? And you're at lunch and someone's like, oh man, I wonder what, everyone pulls their phones out and you're wondering is killed within half a second. And for me, suddenly wondering became this thing that was annoying at the beginning, but then it almost became like a spiritual discipline, like this thing that I loved to do because wondering led me to wonder. And so like the wondering and wonder are two different things. Like I'm talking about wondering, not knowing and having to think and question, but then wonder of like, whoa, like this is, the grandness of awe and wonder. And I feel like those two are so closely connected, but people have lost wonder, the awe and wonder, I think because we know too much. And we were never created, I believe, to know as much as we know. And so wondering and wonder was one of the first things that I got reacquainted with. Now my kids, it's funny because when I got back from this experiment, so I did 2 weeks with the monks, 2 weeks with the Amish, and then 3 weeks with my family with no screens. And whenever I would have a question or someone would have a question and someone would pull their phone out, I was like, no. I don't want to know the answer. I just want to wonder. And so now it's funny because my kids will, if I pull my phone out to answer a question or something, my kids are always like, nope, Dad, we're just going to wonder. Like we're not going to know. So, wondering became one of the things. I think savoring is slowly becoming a lost art. We get everything so quickly. Amazon Prime Now. I mean, there's an app called Amazon Prime Now, right? Which means like you get it within 2 hours to your front door. Like we take our coffee to go. Everything is like rushed. And I just think, what I got to experience with the slowness of living with these monks is like, I got to savor, like I was drinking Dunkin' Donuts coffee. I talk about this in the book, like the breakfast blend. I consider myself a coffee connoisseur. I know the best pour overs of coffee in Nashville, Tennessee. I know the baristas. I want to do the pour overs. Like my palate is refined for coffee. My Dunkin' Donuts breakfast blend tasted better than any cup of coffee I'd ever had in Nashville, Tennessee. Why? Because I was moving slow enough to actually really taste it. I didn't have Twitter on my phone as I was scrolling and drinking my coffee. No, I was just drinking my coffee. And so savoring is something that I think we've lost. It's another lost art of being human. And so when I was with the Benedictines, it was noticing. I didn't have my phone to look down to as I was walking the campus, as I was walking the Abbey grounds. And so I would see things and notice things that I know had I had my phone in my pocket, I never would have. I don't know if I shared this in the book. It's in the documentary, but at one point I noticed a little hummingbird that had fallen from a tree. And I actually spent 3 days like nursing this baby hummingbird back to health. Like I would go feed the little hummingbird and then I was waiting for the mom to come and the mom never came and I thought the hummingbird was going to die. It was this Netflix story that I was like, I found myself in with this hummingbird and then the mom comes down and rescues the hummingbird. And I had 3 days with this hummingbird that I never would have had I been looking at my phone and not noticed it, right? And so, yes, I mean, you could ask me this one question, Alison, and I can talk for 60 straight minutes on all of the things that the monks taught me that I was able to get reacquainted to, that I fell back in love with. And now I do those things on purpose instead of on accident.
Yeah, I love that. It took the sort of full throttle to remind you to remember. Who doesn't love a little luxury every once in a while? I know I do, but let's face it, luxury doesn't always fit within the budget until I discovered Quince. Quince is my go-to for affordable luxury essentials, and let me tell you, they deliver. Just last week, I snagged their 100% washable silk skirt for under $60. Yes, under $60, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's elegant, it's versatile, it's comfortable. I've paired it with heels for a night out. I've paired it with sneakers for a more casual look, and every time it feels like I'm wearing something straight off the runway. Quince offers everything from Mongolian cashmere sweaters starting at $50 to washable silk tops and dresses to 14-karat gold jewelry, all at prices 50 to 80% less than similar brands. How do they do this? They cut out the middleman and they work directly with top factories. Plus, they're committed to ethical, responsible manufacturing. Give yourself the luxury you deserve with Quince. Go to quince.com/bestofyou for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/bestofyou to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/bestofyou.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
I want to, Carlos, talk a little bit about once you leave the monastery, you go live with an Amish community for 2 weeks, which is different in the sense that there's a lot of labor. I related a lot to what you were saying. I come from a line of ranchers working the land. My uncle understands weather patterns 100 times better than weather.com. And you're just like, where does this knowledge come from? I was really relating with a lot of that. When you were describing my family, we were in Boston when the pandemic shut everything down. We came to Wyoming to spend a summer. That's where I'm from. We love it here. It's the mountains. And really never left because of the way the world shifted and everything became virtual. We can be here a lot more. But it did remind me a little bit of what you were describing because culturally, just being in a rural, more agrarian culture, it is different. I mean, literally Amazon, when we're in Boston, Amazon arrives the same day. It takes 4 or 5 days here. There aren't big storehouses nearby. And so that's a silly example. But a lot of what you were saying, and I want you to share with us, because in this Amish community, there's the work, there's the kind of intuitive understanding of the earth. And then I loved this word because it is so true, the visiting.
Yes, visiting.
That's
what they call it.
Sitting around the table, visiting. Tell us a little bit. So you leave the monastery, and you're going to have to read the book to get all the nuance of this, but we're just getting the highlights. But tell us a little bit about kind of what happened when you joined this Amish community, this farming community.
Yes. So by the time I left the monks, I had gotten it down. Like I was like semi-pro monk. Like I was like, put me in, coach. I love this. I didn't want to leave. Like I made all these friends. Like I call it Godspeed. I'd learned to move at Godspeed at 3 miles an hour. Like this was my new jam. And so like, I was contemplative. And then I have this like really shock and awe to my system when I get dropped off at LAX. Right after I'd spent 14 days in 23 hours a day of silence, and there's screens everywhere. And so like I go to the bathroom and there's a screen on the wall. There's screens on the back of the seats on the plane. And so like I'm just kind of looking down, just get me to the Amish. I get there and am thinking to myself, okay, I'm just going to be monk 2.0. And oh my gosh, was I wrong? Like the Amish go hard. Like I think I got to the farm around noon and it was 9 p.m. I had not stopped. They had talked, and I had talked more in those 9 hours than I had the entire 2 weeks I was with the monks. They were pouring me coffee at 9 p.m. They're just like drinking coffee. Like it doesn't even matter if it's like the strongest cup of coffee ever. They work so hard all day, they just fall right to sleep. And so I was so tired. I tell people that it was like moving from a cave to downtown Manhattan. And downtown Manhattan was a 4-way stop in Mount Hope, Ohio. These Amish people, the community, the visiting, the talking, the sharing, the stories is so a part of their culture that, I was a few days in and Willis, my Jedi Yoda sheep farmer guy that was training me to be a sheep farmer, he kept saying, okay, so tomorrow the schedule is we're going to get up in the morning and then we're going to go visit whoever. And then we're going to go visit this person. Then we're going to visit. And they just love to visit. And I asked him, I was like, what's with all the visiting? And he's like, well, Carlos, like, we don't have Facebook. Like, we don't have, Instagram, all of the things that you have. Like, so this is the only way we know
TVs,
what's happening.
Right?
Yeah. They don't have TVs. Like, this is the way that we know things. And so we love to visit. And so,
pass the time.
And pass the time. And they were, so hardworking. Like my, gosh, I just was so tired every single night. When it was time to go to bed, like it took me, I would put my head on the pillow and I think I was drooling within 2 seconds. Like I was so tired from just the hard work that they would do. But also I just started falling in love with the way they did community and the way they took care of each other. I unlearned a lot of things that I had previously learned incorrectly about the Amish. I had all these assumptions and all these things that I thought about the Amish, like, like why is it they don't have technology? Why is it that they don't watch TV or they don't drive cars or, I just thought maybe they thought they were evil. And this was actually so fascinating. One of the biggest things I took from the Amish is I'm asking Willis one day, Willis, what is it about phones or, cars or TVs? Like, how do you guys choose? Because there were some things that they had a generator on their farm. Like I was like, so you got some things that are like, I thought you didn't have.
The electric bike?
Yeah, e-bikes. Like I was like, so you have a generator to charge the e-bike, but you won't have a car. Like, this is weird. Like, how are you guys making these decisions? And he goes, well, every church community sets up their own rules. And so there's different orders of Amish, right? There's some super conservative, there's some less. He's like, but basically the decision that we make with any piece of technology that comes is we ask one question, two questions. Will this piece of technology bring us closer together as a community, or will this piece of technology take us farther apart? And when he said that, I started thinking, oh. And then he's like, because cars. So there's nothing wrong with cars. Like my daughter, she's Mennonite. She has a car. Sometimes she'll drive me to Cleveland if I need something. But if we all had cars and Miss Betty's barn burned down and I was in Cleveland and Farmer Joe was over here and we were hundreds of miles apart from each other, we could not come back together to rebuild her barn in 48 hours like we can when we stay close together. That is why we've made the decision that a car's technology is never going to be. But an e-bike, we can't get too far away from each other because we're going to have to come back to charge the bike. So e-bikes are okay. So Alison, every decision they make with technology isn't about whether they think the technology is evil. It's about, is this piece of technology going to take us farther away from where we want to be or closer to each other? And so, wow, if that wasn't like a revolutionary idea for me with every app I put on my phone, is this going to take me farther away from my community or closer? That was something that I brought back, that literally every single decision I make with screens now runs through that funnel.
That's incredible. It reminds me, it's like the spirit of the law, right? I'm sure it could get fundamentalist in that sense of dogmatic. Anything can, all of us can, but that spirit, that is a question we could all be asking in our families. If we bring this new thing in, will it draw us together or take us apart? I thought that was incredible.
Yes.
Incredible.
No, it is. And I mean, if I could share one more story about Willis, and again, I need everyone to imagine Carlos, who makes a living touching his thumbs to his phone screen, trying to shear a sheep. Like, I'm trying my hardest to look at every day we're trying to cut the hay and, it rained and he's like, we can't cut the hay because it's raining. Like all of these rules that I don't understand with farming. And so, you talk about their intuition and you talk about their being connected to the land. We'd been trying for 7 days to cut the hay. And I'm like, why can't we just cut the hay? And he's like, well, it can't rain. So it didn't rain for like 2 days. And I was like, oh, sweet. It's dry enough. We can cut it. So I walk out super excited. Like, today's the day we're finally going to cut the hay. And I walk out my door and there's like thunderclouds. It's like, and I was like, no, it's going to rain. You could see the rain. I mean, it was right there. You could smell it. You could see it. So I walked up to Willis and I was like, man, Willis, like another day, we're not going to cut the hay. He's like, what do you mean we're not going to cut the hay? And I was like, well, it's raining. Look. And I pointed at the clouds. He's like, don't look up at the clouds. I want you to look at your boots. And I was like, what kind of weird Amish thing is this? He's like, look at your boots. What's on your boots? And I was like, well, nothing. They're wet. He's like, they're wet. He goes, my daddy always told me, and his daddy still lived on the property, that if there's dew on your boots, it's not going to rain. I remember literally laughing out loud when he said that, like out loud. I was almost embarrassed, like that I laughed out loud. I was like, oh, Willis, like I get it. Like that may be like a good hunch thing, but look at the clouds. They're coming this way. He's like, we're cutting the hay. It's not going to rain. So I was like, this is the craziest thing. So like Kathy and I, we go somewhere, we take off. And we're like a mile away from the farm, and it's just dumping on us. Like, it's just pouring rain. We spend the day, I think it was at Ed, his son-in-law's house. It's raining the whole time. We come back. We're a mile away. It's raining. Then, literally, I still can't even explain this correctly, how shocking it was. We got within, 3/4 of a mile of his farm. It's dumping rain, and then the rain just stops. And when I say just stops, it's not like the cloud moved through and the ground was wet. No, it was dry. The ground was dry. We pull up into his farm, and Willis is just standing there with his arms crossed, smiling at me with that look. And I get out of I can't remember what kind of vehicle we were in, but I get out, and he just looks at me. He's like, there was dew on your boots. And sure enough, he cut the hay, and it didn't rain. And it was just this thing, like you said, like, he's got this relationship with the land, and there's something spiritual even about that we've lost because we look at our phone apps all the time that's, wrong half the time. So anyway, I'd like to share that story because it showed me that maybe I'm not as in tune with my intuition as I need to be.
Yeah, I love that. It's sort of, there's the God time with the monks. And then on the farm, there's something about, because I feel it again, that difference when I came from Boston back to where I grew up, where there's this precision in the city, right? There's this precision. We had our son got married. We have a small piece of land out here, and we were going to do it outside on the land. We needed to get it hayed. And I remember it's like, there's not it will be done at 2:00. It will be done when the conditions are right.
Yes, totally. That's when it's going to be done.
And I remember feeling in my body like, this is a different way of being,
Yes.
with
Yes.
the land.
Yes.
With nature.
And what gets thrown away is, for us city folk like me, is like efficiency gets thrown out the window. Like we get so efficient. We want to be so efficient. And what I learned is like, man, there's so much life to be lived on the other side of efficiency. There's so much wonder on the other side of efficiency. Like, what if every once in a while we're just less efficient and we move a lot slower? Maybe that actually is more efficient, right? All of these things are kind of going in my head. But yes, I'm in agreement.
This is where I want to come back to, Carlos, because I'm just dying to know. Now you're back.
I'm back.
You're back in Nashville. First of all, I love that this whole conversation, again, we went into the stores and didn't talk about 5 steps to not having technology, right? This is what this is about. I love what you're doing. It's beautiful. I'm like, man, you are using these gifts God has given you, and it's really beautiful. How is it? How do you come back into the world that you love? How do you come back and keep some of what you learned?
This episode is brought to you by Abercrombie. There's nothing better than the perfect jean and going out top combo, or an outfit that perfectly matches your plans. Abercrombie's relaxed jean goes with every occasion. Date nights with something lace, or daytime with a cozy sweater. And their barrel jean will surprise you. It's the trend that will become a staple in your wardrobe. Abercrombie denim comes in tons of rises, fits, and washes. Find your perfect pair online or in store.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Yes. So good. So I'll let everybody know, it's not like I've not gone back on Instagram. Like, I love it. I'm back with the force. I miss telling stories. I miss, all those things. There's a whole documentary about this. Like, I made more content for screens for us to, I need people to know, like, this whole idea isn't why screens are bad. And when I came back, first of all, like, just to hold my phone in my hand when my best friend Brian gave it back to me when he picked me up, it felt like it weighed 40 pounds. It felt like an anchor. I was like, so it took me another 3 days before I turned it on. I just was like, I can't do it. And then I turned it on, and sure enough, ding, 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 ding. It sounded like I won the lottery. My phone's going off. So I just kind of hit, this is probably going to stress some of your listeners out, but I hit select all, delete on all my text messages. I was like,
I loved that. I was like, wow. Just
yeah.
delete.
If someone needs to get a hold of me really bad, they'll come back at me. So I'm back now, right? So now it's like 2 years past when this all happened. And this is what's so cool. Yes, there's little things that I did that I, set up in my life to help me, but there were no major scaffolding I put up to keep me away from this evil phone. No, now it's really cool. I'm on my phone 3 hours a day. So I literally gained more than half of my life back that I had lost, right? So I went from 7.5 hours a day to 3 hours a day. I launched a book in September. My screen time was 5 hours. It'll go up, it'll go down. But like you said, what's happened isn't that I've what's my screen time and how? No, I've actually just fallen back in love with living all of these beautiful things, the noticing, the wondering, the getting lost and finding my way. So there's things that now cause me to be on my phone less. I just pick it up less because I'm infatuated with living by wondering. I just don't look things up anymore. I don't think we were created to know everything that we know. So a few of the things that have been helpful for me, for instance, like I bought an alarm clock. And I now don't charge my phone next to my bed. So literally that's not a big deal, but that probably saves me a whole hour of screen time a day because I'm not in bed scrolling it, right? I no longer, this is a fun one, I no longer use Siri or GPS or Google Maps to find my way. I look it up before I leave my house. On my phone, I look it up and I write the directions down on a piece of paper. And I just drive, and my sense of direction is so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's things that I've done, but more than anything, I have just fallen back in love with, again, the savoring, the wondering, the noticing, the solitude, all of these things that we don't have anymore, and I just don't want to lose it.
So I love what you're saying, and I just realized this. So my first solo book, The Best of You, is a book on boundaries, and my thesis in the book, Carlos, is that boundaries are less about what you're saying no to and more about what you're saying yes to, what you're protecting. And this is what you're saying. It wasn't about setting boundaries with my phone. It was, oh my gosh, I want these other things in my life.
Yes.
And that's allowed some boundaries around this other thing. I love that.
And here's the cool thing. We'll take that yes and a step farther is when I was home for those 3 weeks with my family at the end of the experiment with no phone. So I didn't have a phone. My family still did. They still had on Netflix. They were still TikToking. They were all the things. When I came home for those 3 weeks, I did not set up one rule for my family. I was like, you guys keep living your life. If you turn on TV, I'll walk out. I'll pick up my book. My family's screen time went down 50%.
Wow.
Simply because I was not on mine. So, again, this is not some scientific experiment. The whole thing's not a scientific experiment. This is just one man's story, kind of what I did. But again, like, when I started doing these things, even the people around me were affected. And even, so suddenly there were these boundaries that got set up around my family, and so even my kids' screen times are different because of something that I did. So this is not only something I believe this book can not only impact you in your life, but I think it really can impact those around you because they're going to be like, wow, I never even thought of that. Like, I want to wonder a little bit more too. So be that person at the party, whenever you listen to this, that when somebody has a question and someone pulls their phone out, you be the guy that goes or the girl that goes, no, we're not going to look it up. Let's just wonder.
So good. It's so good. More is caught than taught, right? You're showing, hey, I want to go outside and watch the baby birds.
Yeah.
Totally. And maybe someone else will come join you. I love it, Carlos. And here's what I love about this book is I genuinely enjoy your content online. This is a little bit of a side conversation, but I tend to think of social media in particular. A little bit, I put it in the category of alcohol. Some people can use it in moderation and they're okay. I can have a couple glasses of wine a week without an issue. I don't think I have that ability with social media. So I've had to really curb myself.
Yep.
And I think a lot of that is case by case. I will say you're one of the people who uses it in a way. It's like watching someone who can drink in moderation. It's like, wow, that's amazing that someone can do that and enjoy the good in it. Maybe I'm not able to do that. Does that make sense to you?
That not only makes sense to me, but I think that, that is such a great way for people to look at it as well. Like, again, because I've got friends too that do things that I think, man, I would love to be able to do it like that, but I just can't. So like, I have to know myself, Yeah.
Exactly. So I love that you're the one because you are back online and you are telling us the story and you are showing us through the means that we need, right? Otherwise, how would we know? So it's just such a great read. I loved it. I read it, just straight through. It's got your authentic self, your humor. I know there's a documentary now that's with it. So tell my listeners where to find you, where to find your content, the movie, the book, all the things.
Absolutely. If you go to reconnectedbook.com, the book's there, the documentary's there, the trailer's there, all of the things are there. Instagram is kind of where I hang out, Instagram and YouTube, as I'm making things on screens for you to look at them on screens and all those places. But again, like I want to remind people that this book, and I think you would agree, like there's zero shame involved. You will not feel shame about your phone. You will not feel like, oh my gosh, I'm on my phone too much. Like I think it's going to excite you about a lot of the things that maybe we've forgotten how to do. So yeah, I encourage everybody to, pick it up and get reconnected, because that's the other reason why I titled it Reconnected is everyone when I first came back was like, how was it when you disconnected? Like, oh, I'd love to disconnect. And the more people said that, the more I thought, I get what they're saying, but I really feel like I'm actually plugged in now. Like, I feel like I'm actually reconnected. And so, yeah. So, again, I'm trying to spin everything just a little bit, but I think it's going to be helpful for a lot of people and enjoyable.
That's a great read. And it's a bestseller. So you're hitting a nerve and you're touching on things people really need. So thank you. Thanks for doing it. And thanks for continuing to create content. Thanks for joining us today, Carlos.
You're the freaking best. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of The Best of You. It would mean so much if you take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts and click the plus or follow button. That will ensure you don't miss an episode and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave your 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday. And remember, as you become the best of who you are, you honor God, you heal others, and you stay true to your God-given self.